basically the principle behind what we were trying to do with these was to explore the challenges facing leaders in it. Okay, we're not live yet. That's great. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this month's PEP Live. Joining us this month, we're very, very fortunate to have a really impressive lineup. Starting off with, I'm going to, I think, to be fair, I think I will let the guests introduce themselves. But first up, we have Stela Lupushor. Stela is the author of a fabulous book I had the pleasure of reading recently called Humans at Work. Stela, you're very welcome.
Thrilled to be here.
We're also joined by Elizebeth Varghese. Elizebeth is a global people leader at Deloitte and one of the top 100 HR influencers, and a really powerful speaker on culture and people in the workforce. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hey, happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
And we're also joined by a good friend of mine, Craig Fulton. Craig, or Ned to his friends, is I suppose, Craig, where do we start with you, man? Olympic and world champion hockey coach, and voted this year the coach of the year in Belgium for leading his club racing to their first title in I don't know how long was it, Craig? 50 years, was it?
80 years.
80 years. There you go. So, you know, it's lovely to have all you guys on board, and I'm really excited to chat to you. And it's kind of what I tried to do when we put these panels together is to bring people from very different backgrounds and sometimes different philosophies together, and we kind of figure out, well, what is leadership, and what are the challenges facing the future world of leadership? And I often throw somebody from a sports background into the mix, because I think there's a very interesting angle, because sometimes, obviously, I've a long career, a long background in the world of sport, but sometimes when I talk to corporate clients, they kind of go, well, what relevance does sport have to business? And my philosophy is very simple, that, you know, we're all in the business of helping people perform to their maximum, whether that's in the corporate environment, whether it's in the arts, whether it's sports. It's about helping people achieve the highest level of performance they can reach. And I think some of the things, you know, there's an awful lot of conversation right now about remote working and the challenges that we all face, and, you know, how do you bring people together, and how do you how do you engage teams when, you know, workforce can be very disparate at the moment. And Elizabeth, maybe I'll start with you from your career. What do you see as the biggest challenge facing, or the biggest challenges facing the workforce right now from your perspective? Sorry, Elizabeth, you're on mute.
Yes, of course. There's quite a few things, you know, I think organizations and leaders are really dealing with, irrespective of the industry or the sector. And I think that, you know, the two things I think are really prominent are, the first is the intersectionality of work and technology. That has become a pivot that's really transforming how all of us learn and work, and even, you know, they play sports or train for sports, right? So I think there's that aspect. It's something that organizations are trying to get their arms around, and all the implications of that, you know, security, access, how people experience work, how they collaborate, how they engage. So that's kind of this bolus of a discussion that really organizations are trying to deal with. I think the second part of it is, you know, something that is not new, but I think has really come into has been magnified by the pandemic. And it's really all these conversations that we've been having over the years about intergenerational attitudes towards work, and the need for customizing an experience, the need for feeling like you belong, or you have a sense of purpose in the organization. I think those things have really become exacerbated by these past couple of years. Again, not new. We've talked about these things for many years, and folks in the workspace, or the I'm sure coaches talked about this a long time. But I think those are the two challenges that I think organizations are trying to really manage and navigate through. Stella, Greg, I know what you're seeing.
I would look at it from three buckets, right? To add on to what you're just articulated. I think at the macro level, there is a lot of volatility. We see significant economic pressures around the world. We see political tensions and polarization. We still see continued health impact of the virus. We have a war in Ukraine that is still lingering and will have downstream impact on energy, on the stability in Europe and the rest of the world, right? So all of that is kind of a background and a context that drives a lot of tension and a lot of anxiety about the future and the stability of our lives. We also have organizational pressures, and a lot of companies, while they are dealing and figuring out a way to survive and deal with inflation, they're figuring out a way to ensure they preserve the workforce. So this is one of the first time when we have such a huge economic downturn without significant layoffs or impact on the workforce. So it's a signal that, yes, companies are finally appreciating the value of the workers. At the same time, it cost pressures on them. So there will be probably a lot slower paced impact on the workforce, but not as much of an investment and growth and kind of looking at those being trying to just preserve the economic stability at the moment. And then, of course, personally, each individual has their own tensions. They're now trying to figure out, how do I go back to work? Companies are demanding the hybrid, whatever shape or form that takes. Some people already form habits, move to other places. More likely than not, they're not going to, some of them will not necessarily relocate back or accept a lot more strict guideline. So it will be an interesting time to see how the nature of work and the workplace is evolving going forward, because it's a very different environment and context for organizations to navigate.
Yeah, and it's actually really interesting, and I saw it in the, from a sporting perspective. And Craig, we might talk about this before we get into some of the cool stuff from the current climate. But like, one of the big challenges, and I know something you're passionate about, is tying the personal lives and the challenges of the players outside the sport into their performance mindset when they're there, and how the two worlds kind of come together. And I know we had a conversation before with one of my colleagues, Bernard, who was a national champion in a team over here, where his coach used to talk about the holy trinity of work, sport, and family, and bringing, like, you can't have one without recognizing the others. And obviously, from Stella and Elizabeth, from your perspective in the corporate world, it's still that principle of you've got family and you've got personal life. But Craig, one of the things that you guys did really well with Belgium when you were preparing for the Olympics, I mean, you guys were at a time striving to be the first team in history for the European, world, and Olympic titles together, which is quite remarkable. And then a pandemic hits, and then the Olympics delayed a year. So a lot of your senior players are going to be a year older come the Olympics, which, could have a massive impact in your preparation. But something I've heard about in the corporate world recently, from a psychological point of view, is productivity paranoia. This fear by leaders that people aren't doing their work. And then the feeling of the people in the group, in the teams, feeling that the leaders don't see the work they're doing because they're not in the office doing it. And what you guys did at Belgium, you were forced with a situation where you had to send, basically you set up a gym in everybody's house, didn't you? Maybe talk a little bit about how you guys, despite being all separated, found a way to keep the unit together.
I think when you talk specifically about being involved in a full-time program, your connections with each other, because you see, it's like you're in the office every day, but everyone has a role, and the physical side of it is really important as much as the technical side of the sport to improve that. But the mental side is always going to be there. And then suddenly that connection is taken away. So normally from a full-time program, you spend all this time together, 4 days a week, maybe 5 days a week. You do maybe 4 to 6 to 8 hours a day in different kind of fields of your sport, areas of your sport, and then suddenly it's all taken away. Now, what we had to do was get back to the connection and try and keep that connection going, because we didn't know how long we weren't able to be together. It could be 2 months, it could be 3 months. We thought, geez, it would never be longer than 5 months. And then it went into almost that period of time, 7 months about. And I think the physical was always the biggest one. So in Belgium, the rules were you could get out of the house. So there was triathlons organized. There was cycling organized with Garmin, and group rides done together, but not necessarily we all meet together as 20 guys and then do it. But they had to do a certain amount of time on the bike and run. And the nice thing about it was each guy did receive gym equipment. So that was not an issue for them to, okay, I have a gym program, I have to do it X amount of times a week, I can carry on. So that's then the connection of, we went and did a whole lot of Zooms around, okay, quizzes. There was even like a treasure hunt through Brussels, where the Brussels group and the Antwerp group, they had to literally find the coordinates of a place, take a photo, and this was done all kind of within the rules, but at the same time, you're getting out to try and do something specific and not just leave your house because I don't want to stay in my house anymore. This was actually a treasure hunt for the Brussels guys versus the Antwerp guys. Points were tallied up, and then there was a winner, given to it. So it was pretty ingenious. And then also the fact that we had quizzes. I had to organize the quiz as well, so I gathered a whole lot of the kids' photos, and you had to guess which kid was this at 5 years old or 4 years old, all the way through. And then it was just a connection. The main thing was to try and build and drive a connection in this time where it was not really a well-known scenario. We'd not been through it before, and we had to prepare for an Olympic Games, and that was then postponed by a year. So this was not an easy time. The problem was that the team was number one at the world before the pandemic and peaking really, really well physically. And had the Olympics gone through, we would be in our best physical, because it was planned that way. And then now suddenly you're a year out now. How do you maintain it, keep it going? The team's a year older, with selection change, all these things would kind of the unknowns. And unfortunately, we got through it. We won the gold, but it wasn't easy at all. Geez, there was some really tough moments in trying to keep it all on track, as you know, and as in any business. But the vision was clear. I think the behaviors of the guys in the times when we weren't together was really, really good. And it was all underpinned by the values of what makes this team tick.
Yeah.
Can I comment? I think what you described is perfect, because what you tried to do was all of those efforts, right? You, first of all, reduced friction. You looked at what can get in the way of them performing, and therefore you gave them the equipment. You helped them get access that they needed. So it's one principle to create a better experience. Number two, you found ways and methods to build trust, especially when you have a very new ways of working and interacting. You did build that human connection and ability to know who your team and peers are and how you interact with each other, how you communicate. And then the other part that you've also talked about is having fun. You really need to have a little bit of fun, because work is not gonna carry the day ultimately.
No, not easily anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny because it also brings up another thing for me, which is when you're faced with, and having been involved in Olympics and Olympic cycles, when you're faced with being prepared and in the best shape you can be for a specific date, and then that gets shifted out, what actually happens isn't that necessarily you throw out what you've done in prep and then just go back and repeat the year again. But it's more, and I think it's very relevant to the corporate world, that it's more about, how do we measure success in the next 12 months? And how have we measured success up to now? And quite often that's not about the gold medal. Like from the point of view of Craig's guys doing their job, it's not about winning the gold medal. It's about each member of the squad turning up and playing the game to the best of their ability every game, one game at a time. So it's kind of like, if you think about it from the corporate point of view, it's like when you give a sales team a target that is, in their heads, they're going, oh my God, this is unachievable. And nobody's ever achieved this target before. Well, really, you're not going to set out in the first day of the month and achieve that target. But what you're going to do is you're going to put the steps in place each day, one at a time, to take you a step closer to that target. And that's how you achieve success. And I think when you look at the kind of world we're in right now and the topics we're talking about right now, maybe some of the targets are more around the emotional connection and the balance of the team as much as they are about the physical output of the work. And Adam Grant talked lovely there recently in a podcast about how employees expect their managers to care about their emotional well-being. And I wonder, and Elizabeth, maybe you can take on that kind of from the point that Craig and Stella were making, about what you guys do or what you have done in your career to kind of to show your team, I suppose, a level of care, or to create a solid culture for members of your team to perform.
Sure. There was one thing that Craig mentioned that really resonated with me, Craig, among everything else, right? You talked about how the fact that what they do outside of practice or outside of work is very critical. And I think that's a really important principle, because that kind of gives us a North Star to really think about, and how do we manage our teams or our organizations, what they do outside of work, how they feel, how they experience life outside of work, I think is actually really critical in how it influences what they end up doing at work. So, the philosophy really of bringing your whole self to work is something that I strongly believe in. But, I also acknowledge that it's not easy to do, right? Because people, one, struggle with feeling able to bring their whole selves to work, but also feeling like the organization is receptive to that. So I think as leaders, it's really important for us to set the stage to say, hey, this is who we are as an organization, as people, and both both the parts of your life, of your focus, both at work and outside of work, are equally important. So I think that's really a critical part of it. And then in the three ways that leaders can really make that happen or show that it's more than talk. I think the first is really by demonstrating, right, and sharing what you're doing outside of work to keep yourself balanced, to ensure that people understand who's the person behind the role, behind the manager or the team member. So I think that's really the critical part of it. The second part of it, so it's one is really being yourself and sharing. The second part of it is really actively encouraging people to speak and speak up, irrespective of the issue, because we don't know what people deal with. I'm often reminded of this, saying that I keep in cognizance of be kind, because you don't know what people are dealing with, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that's really important for leaders, to encourage people to speak up and engage and feel like they can, so it's not just saying a blanket statement, oh, you can say what you want, but actively encouraging people. So I think that's the second part of it. So be who you are and be that boldly, encourage people to speak up. And I think the third part of it is really the advocacy. As leaders, we do have a very specific responsibility to advocate for what people need to deal with as they're bringing their best selves to work. So that aspect of active advocacy, active seeking out and communication, I think is critical in any kind of coaching or inspirational situation. So those are kind of the three things that I've seen.
Yeah, and that's very much at the heart, Stella, of what Humans at Work was about, really, wasn't it? Isn't it? That was kind of the inspiration for your book.
Absolutely. And my co-author, Anna Tavis, and I, we definitely saw the opportunity to really take a step back and rethink what is it that the work environment is for, and how can we bring more empathy, more humanity, more ease of doing your work to the work environment. And there is something about the structure of what work is. Typically, we think about jobs and job descriptions when, in fact, a lot of the jobs are a list of things that probably are accurate about what you're going to do maybe day one, if ever. And we use this as a gospel when, in fact, the day-to-day activity shape it very differently when you start engaging the workforce who can get that done. We typically think either employees or contingent workers or contractors, as opposed to thinking more holistically and saying, what is the key capabilities that are required to do this specific unit of work, and how might we orchestrate it alongside those other options we have in order to accomplish the goal of the work activity. And then we can think about the work environment. What is the most optimal workspace and workplace for this combo of worker with work that can be done? And we, again, are not limited to office or home, right? We work in co-working spaces, we work in coffee shops, we work from a remote island. It's all about rethinking the flexibility and the experience so that you can be productive regardless of where you are participating from. And then the last, more important one that I think we're all touching upon is the worth, right? The value exchange between organizations and individuals. We are seeing a shift in the power dynamics between the employers and workers. We see this in great resignation, great reimagining, great reshuffling, whatever you want to call it. We see this in the rise, at least here in the US, of unionization, so the worker voice. We see the emergence of workers standing for their rights and ability to have balance, to have access to benefits and healthcare and privileges that actually you get from employers. And if you're not full-time regular employee, you may not even have access or have privilege to take advantage of those benefits. We have to rethink what is it that people want and expect from the work environment beyond just safe work environment and fair remuneration and transparency and ethical behavior, right? Everybody comes to work for very different needs, and depending on the life stage and the circumstances at home, we may expect different things. So organizations are starting to grapple with that complexity. How do you tailor your offerings to make it a little bit more inclusive, to allow people to take advantage of whatever they need at the moment in this stage of their life?
It's funny, I am a good friend of mine and of Pep Talks is a professor called Paul Zak in America, and he's done some fabulous work on measuring trust. And he just looks at things from a very different angle. And what I think when he talks about trust, I think it really kind of ties to the heart of well-being and connection and team engagement and team experience. But some of the stats that he's come up with are that 74% people in a high trust environment say they're less stressed. There's 106% more energy at work, 50% higher productivity, 13% fewer sick days, 76% more engagement. Like incredible stats based on the simple idea of trust. And one of the things, Craig, I know that you're doing a lovely thing at the moment with your team. You were telling me the other day about you guys have done something really lovely with the numbers on your shirts to kind of bring a sense of engagement and togetherness and recognizing, I suppose, the humans at the center of your club. Maybe tell us a little bit about that. You're on mute. Sorry. The joys of video.
Yeah, it was making a bit of a noise there.
Yeah.
I think just so my situation is slightly slightly interesting. I moved from a club where, as in the introduction, we won the league for the first time in 80 years, from a club that wasn't expected to win, but had been in the final 5 years and had lost 4 finals. And this was the 5th one, but not in a row, over a period of 10 years. And we fortunately put a team together. The chemistry was strong, and we got over the line and won that league. Now I've moved to a club it's called Dragons, and they are a highly reputable team and have won 10 Belgian championships. So now it's a totally different thing. But at the same time, they didn't have the season they wanted, and they missed the playoff for the first time in, I don't know, 10 years exactly. So I came in and I really wanted to just try and create a purpose bigger than just playing hockey matches. And the idea was taken from the South African rugby team that went to the World Cup. And what they had done is, on their playing shirts, they had put the individual players, closest family members they could choose a photo. And this collage was put inside the numbers of the rugby jerseys at the World Cup in Japan. And I felt like it really triggered something with me, because it's a strong club. It has a big base, a fan base. It has a big population of hockey players in the club. And I thought, how do we connect all of this together and be a vision of that while we play? And the closest thing that came was, okay, we could get 3 photos per person, and they would obviously have to mean something to you in your journey from family, father, brother, girlfriend, wife, children, whatever it was, whatever helped you in your journey and get you to this point. And we would all be wearing that players, close and loved ones, and your own, the staff, the players. But the key was to explain who they were and where they were on your journey. And then we had a really strong training camp, and this was the theme of introducing these people to everyone. And fine, it's always in that honeymoon period. It looks great. It looks really good. It looks on our jerseys, and people are like asking, what is that about? And that's always a good thing. But one really strong thing happened. We played our very first game of the campaign, and one of the Argentinian guys, his gran, who was on his photo, had passed away. And now she was part of our extended family, but now we were introduced to her, and now she's passed. And the chemistry that built on that game was dedicated to him, and obviously the remembrance of his grandmother. And it was just unbelievable, the chemistry in the group, and the purpose was bigger than just the hockey match. It was always now linked to a family member or someone that's part of our, greater family. And yeah, we performed really well and won the game. So I'm not saying that that was the only reason, but it's definitely a fresh look on how else to keep them intrinsically motivated, not just through the sport, but also because of family members and people that are close to us.
Yeah, and it's fascinating, isn't it? Like, I mean, we do. I mean, when you think about the old concept of work-life balance, there was just some sort of kind of misconception that work existed over here and life exists over here, and somehow we find this happy life where we can kind of casually flit between. When the one thing that the pandemic has really shown us is that life and work and everything else is just a mishmash. For most of us, we're working at home, dealing with I have I'm very surprised my dog hasn't decided to interrupt our chat so far. He'll appear at some stage, but you just get on with it, and the challenges of having a bad day at work, bringing it home to the family, or having a bad day in a relationship and bringing it to work, and all that stuff is really challenging. And then you layer on top, from a leadership point of view, things like imposter syndrome and burnout and fear of doing a good job and always questioning yourself, or maybe kind of looking at what your competitors are doing and not feeling like you guys are valid enough, or maybe just feeling like you, like for all the network in the team that is solid, you're still the leader on the outside. You don't want to be their best friend, but you do want to have a relationship with them. And there's that little bit of isolation. And I think it's really interesting, particularly it being Mental Health Awareness Month. And obviously, none of us are mental health experts on this call. But it's kind of thinking like, what do you guys as leaders do to look after yourselves? And how do you allow yourself, allowing for everyone on this call, I know works ridiculously long hours. So how do you allow yourself time to breathe and find not work-life balance, but find some peace and some downtime and some time to recharge in the middle of all of the craziness that success in a career brings, I suppose? I'll let you choose who wants to answer that first.
Elizabeth, would you like to go
I
first?
think-
Because you
I
have a
think,
huge practice
like-
to run.
That's a
Sure,
difficult one.
I'm happy to bite
That's
the
really,
bullet.
really difficult.
The truth is, listen, I'm a working mom. I have 2 kids. I have 2 teenagers. I have a dog. I have a spouse who has a pretty intense job as well, and I have family who are thousands of miles away from me. That's right. My dog, it's funny, Neil. I was just thinking, I'm so glad my dog hasn't said a word. He's just like 6 feet away. And I'll just say this for a second because it is linked to my mental health. He's 6 pounds. He's a Yorkie, but with a Napoleon complex, who takes his job. I think that the truth is that, we all are juggling different challenges. I have, friends who are dealing with elder care from thousands of miles away or, from close by, right? The challenges are different. I think that the key is, I have found for me as I have gotten older and hopefully a little wiser, is to allow yourself to recognize that you need it. And I think for many high achievers, this is, personal to me, right? We don't recognize that we need to find moments where you can actually, say, okay, you know what, this is my cup of coffee that will be drunk before it gets cold. Or, this is the class that I am going to take no matter, who's calling for a lost tiffin box or can't find their homework, right? And so it's this active act of balancing. I find every hour of the day. And that's my experience. And I think everybody has a similar challenge. Sometimes people are grappling with mental health or, a relationship at work or at home, which, actively kind of makes you need or requires you to look and seek for balance. So I think, for me personally, that's really important. And I think the second thing is sharing that with our teams and, being vulnerable and being open about it, I think is what builds trust. Because that's what, there's so many research theories around what builds trust, right? And I think it's really that human connection that I have found over the years, for sure.
Stella?
I am all the way with Elizabeth. The same is recognizing when you need the break and really taking care of yourself, because when you start seeing the signs of being stressed and frazzled, that's it's a sure sign that if you don't make a change, um, it's not going to get any better. So it's stepping into the middle of the situation and realizing that you're not in a life-saving occupation, right? There's nobody on a emergency room table in your life, at least literally, that needs to be saved. So a lot of the stress, I think a lot of it is self-imposed, as we described. So recognizing and taking action, that's one. The other thing that I found really helpful for me is simplifying things. As an independent contractor, as I'm working with multiple clients at the same time, I have like 13 email accounts that I need to manage. I have calendars that need to be synced up. All of that requires very tight discipline and coordination. So to me, my goal in life always is to find the next tool, the next best thing that will allow me to integrate all of those things. So not even the work on life, but the work activities themselves. So productivity tools, it's limiting the notifications, it is reducing the distractions, saying no to certain, activities that will really create space. Because for us in a work environment, the challenge is all of this context switching, right? There was an article recently in Harvard Business Review that were talking about people staying for about 11 seconds on an app before switching and toggling to the next one. And in average, they're toggling about 12,000 times a day, 1,200 times a day. And every single time you toggle to a new app, it takes about 2 seconds for you to refocus and reorient. So all of this context switching has a taxing impact on your mental ability to stay focused and, not release the cortisol that comes as a result of that switching as well. So the work design and the workplace design has a huge influence, and many times we don't necessarily consider that from the workplace perspective, because if we try to focus everything on customer experience and everything, all the friction points are eliminated, why can't we do that for our workers? Because they are the ones who have to deliver that great experience. So if their systems don't work, calendars are not integrated, passwords get forgotten, all of this switching that has to happen, all of that adds up. Plus, on top of the monitoring tools that are increasingly being deployed that create this additional sense of mistrust. Because if, when you're in the office, you weren't working 100%, 8 hours or 9 hours, whatever it is. Why are you expecting to do that and be productive 100% of the time throughout the work? So a lot of things we need to be really mindful when it comes to adoption of technology and the impact that technology has on our mental health.
Yeah, it's it fascinates me really. It's something that Craig, I know it's like from a sports point of view, it can become all consuming, and like you have your own personal challenges with with your family living over here and you're over and back, and
Yeah.
it's the life of a professional coach, that travel is part of the deal. But it is something that I love the idea I saw recently, where companies were giving people a mental health day, which is different to sick days. And I just thought it's an interesting kind of thought on doing something different. But you guys, like you mentioned, your player and how you guys kind of celebrate his grandmother as part of you guys, acknowledging that he was suffering in that moment, and it brought you together as a team. And you spoke brilliantly before about Simon Gagnon at the World Cup, who lost his father before the semi-final, and how that just brought you guys together in a way that you've never seen before, and you were unbelievable to win your first title and stuff like that. When you're thinking about that side of it, and I know that you and I, when we were working together with teams and we were talking about going to India, and one thing we were thinking was, how do we look after the mental health of our players when we're down there for 4, 5, 6 weeks? When you're thinking about it, from the player's point of view, but also from yourself, how do you ensure you manage to reset? Like, especially when you like you guys are off to the World Cup in India in January, right?
January, early January, yeah.
And then the next thing is Paris. And so there's large chunks of time you're away from home. You're responsible for all these young guys under your care, but you're also responsible for yourself. And how do you find what is it that you think is the smart thing to do to prioritize yourself in that moment?
I think for me, because I'm quite an enthusiastic kind of character, I'm the eternal optimist. That's kind of my downfall in a good way, but that takes energy. So I really have to protect my energy. I have to protect the amount of time that I give to. So if I do 3 sessions in a day club and I have a triple on a Tuesday, so how do I stay focused and energized for the first one, for 2 hours, the next one for 2 hours, and then travel, and then do the next one for 2 hours in the evening. And then over a 6-week, 10-week, 12-week block, how do I maintain that is, what players expect when they see me? So I have to be very, very aware of that. So I have to really eat well. I have to sleep well. And at times I don't sleep well because there's a lot of information that I've got to get through, video to watch and then plan. So sometimes I know I'm not where I want to be. I know where I need to be, but I know where I'm not. And I really have to push through. I really do, because I have to be the face of, okay, if they're in a low mood, I need to be the opposite in the mirror and bring them into that space. If I realize that the environment is really, really good, I just need to almost like throw bath salts into the warm water and just, keep it going, but create that environment. So you're reading a lot about people, but I know myself really, really well. So I know what I need to bring, and I know when I'm in that sweet spot. And the days when I'm not, then honestly, I can't hide it. But I'm a bit more short-tempered. I'm a bit more impatient. But then I'll tell people, I'm not where I want to be. I'm tired, and let's go. Let's do it. We're going to make this one work and make it work really well. But when you go away for a long period of time, and I'm away from the family, I have 3 children, and my wife is obviously an amazing kind of person in what she does to allow me to be away, and how we make it work. But we go to India for a month, or last time we went was 6 weeks. And me and the other assistant coach, we went and played badminton, but we didn't know where we could play badminton. So we walked into the university, we found a hall, we ended up meeting people, then we ended up playing badminton. And then it became a regular thing on the tour, we played badminton. And then it was kind of like trying to set the schedule of, okay, here's hockey, we're away from hockey, we do all the work, we have 2 hours, what are we going to do? Let's go play badminton, or let's go and explore or find something. So you always have to be quite creative to manage your time and manage your energy. And that for me is really important for me, is about energy management. Because I have to give it. I have to give it.
Right.
Being a coach and I have to give. If I don't have it, I can't give what I don't have. So I have to protect it, and I have to make sure I have it.
I think that's fabulous. If I could just jump in here, because, hey, one, I'm learning so much. So thank you to both of you. But Craig, you also raised a really important point, right? Because I think as leaders, we have to see ourselves as coaches. That is the job of the leader in an organization. If I can just draw that analogy, right? We're there to people play their best game. And if we don't have it, we can't, give it. Totally agree. And I think there's a lot to be learned in how business leaders should operate from, coaches who really inspire people to go over and above. I do have one question for you, because, your job and role is fascinating. When you think about motivating people, right, because you're motivating this team of very disparate folk who are working under difficult conditions, bound by rules. Can you tell me a little bit about, I'm curious about the positive aspect of motivation, in the sense of, you're not motivating people from a negative, it's not the stick, right? It's about the carrot in many ways to win, to do work together. I'd love to understand that a little bit. And Neil, I didn't mean to take this off track, but I think that's
on track to me. You go for it.
Fascinating point. If you can share a little bit too. Craig, freeze. I hope I didn't freeze him. The question.
That's when you ask a great question. I'll fill in for Craig and see if hopefully he'll pop back on. But it is a fascinating conversation, and it is a really interesting thing. And to me, it just reinforces the correlation, not just between sport and business, but between anything in life that asks us to perform at a high level. It's very easy to get caught up in your own niche, right, and think, you might know sports, but you know nothing about what it's like to sit in a board meeting when you're under pressure and presentation. The PowerPoint doesn't work and blah, blah, blah. And really, it's all just about finding something that works. Craig, my man, I was covering for you, answering very poorly in the kind of quality that you could answer. But yeah, sorry. For me, I'll hand it back to you, Craig. But I was just kind of saying that for me, it's about understanding that and you can take this on to a different level, but what I've worked on, particularly from a mental point of view in sport, is the idea that you build. A great example actually is a sprinter. A good friend of mine is a guy called John Coughlin, and John is the coach of an Olympic sprinter called Jasmine Camacho. And Jasmine fell in the Rio Olympics. She hit the 9th hurdle and fell in the semi-final, didn't make the final. John started working with her a couple of years leading into Tokyo. Jasmine was absolutely flying, technically very good, very, very fast. She went into the Tokyo Olympics as the fastest woman in the world. But in the back of her mind was, the last time I was here, I hit the hurdle, I fell, I failed. So the whole conversation, John would talk to me regularly throughout the whole Olympic experience. We were having constant conversations around messaging for Jasmine and the best way to approach it and all that kind of stuff. And one thing that we kept reinforcing was the fact that, and it was a perfect metaphor for life, you can't win the gold medal in the start blocks. You're not going to run, like the time you run, where you finish in the race, you've no control over that until you cross the line. What you do is you influence it by everything you do throughout the race. So it's like every hurdle is one challenge that you have to clear. And then you breathe, and it's essential for sprinters that they stay relaxed. And you see this all the time. That when sprinters get tense, they go backwards. And when sprinters stay relaxed, they maintain their speed. So Jasmine's thing was to breathe. She had 3 strides between a hurdle. It was breathe, stride, clear the hurdle, breathe, stride, clear the hurdle. And it was just to stay relaxed and let the performance flow from it. And she set an Olympic record in the semi-final. She won the gold medal in the final. It was incredible to watch. But for me, it was the perfect metaphor for life, that you don't, and Craig, I hand it back to you, you don't go and win a league title, you don't go and win an Olympic title. Even when you are sending the guys onto the field in the Olympic final, you're not talking about winning the Olympic title. You're talking about doing what you have to do to score a goal, to keep their defense solid, to win each moment, to come out on top of each quarter. And that the ultimate goal is to win the game. And then the gold medal is the benefit of winning the game. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think, like, I'm sorry, I apologize about just missing that last section there. But I think to bring it to something where you are having to perform in the moment, you wouldn't be good enough if you hadn't made that point. And there wouldn't be things that are working already to get you to that point. So now it's about realizing, okay, like I like to call it the 4 C's, where you have the confidence in your ability because you're already there, you're doing something really, really well. But you also have to have the composure to bring the skills that you need to complete the task. But you have to commit to doing what you said you were going to do before all of this happened. Now's the time to commit to do it, you know? And you have to communicate as a team, especially in a team environment. Individual sports so different. Like you're talking about, she has to do one thing. She has to start, she has to breathe, she has to jump, and everything relies on her. Now we talk about a team sport, and it's so complex because we have to make 7, 8 passes or phases before we can even get close to the goal. And now every single person has to be in sync with what the game plan is and how to actually execute this. And then you make one mistake. Now everyone has to recover the ball and start all over again. And this goes on for 60 minutes. And, you know, the beauty about process versus outcome is you still have to be unbelievably confident in your own ability. Otherwise, why would you be there in the first place? Because the only reason to go to a World Cup is to win it, in my opinion. You know, and you have to be that blatantly bold about, okay, what are we doing here? We're in an Olympic competition. What do we want to do? Okay, there's a realistic goal and an ideal goal. Okay, we ranked 3 in the world. So realistically, I can say that we should want to win a medal or want to win the gold. The ideal goal would be to win the gold. The realistic one is where you ranked. If you're 10th in the world to win a medal, that's a different conversation. And I've been on both sides now. I was in that position being the coach of a team that was 10th in the world, and we wanted to win a medal. And that's a big stretch. So everything has to go right. And I'm not saying that can't happen, because we've heard of brilliant stories that it has happened. but the repeatable of that happening is not likely. But when you're in the top 4 in the world or top 6 and you want to break into the top 3, that's doable. But you still have to have the mindset and the composure and the confidence and the commitment, to do this in the moment. And that's the beauty of sport.
That is the beauty of sport, and it's also the beauty of life. If we transfer it over, we can think about it for all of us. It's something lovely in delivering the best we're capable of in the moment, no matter what it's doing. And maybe, unfortunately, I'm looking at the time, and this conversation, I could sit here all day. I'm sure people listening probably have better things to be doing. Stella, Elizabeth, I know you guys have better things to be doing right now. So I just want to take the chance to say, look, thank you so much, all of you, for taking part. It was a really, really interesting chat. Probably worth us doing a part 2 at some stage. I hope all of you have an amazing day, and keep striving for the gold medals in whatever it is you do. Craig, I'll talk to you.
Thanks, Al.
This was great to see all of you. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. It was great.